Still? This is an on-speak mode. Leave it. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قد خسر الذين كذبوا بلقاء الله حتى إذا جاءتهم الساعة بغتة قالوا يا حسرتنا على ما فرطنا فيها وهم يحملون أوزارهم على ظهورهم على ساء ما يزرون وما الحياة الدنيا إلا لعب ولهو وللدار الآخرة خير للذين يتقون أفلا تعقلون صدق الله العلي العظيم وصدق رسوله النبي الكريم ونحن على ذلك من الشاهدين. I bear witness that without Allah there is no God. I bear witness that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, may the peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, is the last, the final messenger of Allah, after whom no prophet or new will come. And I begin in the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful. The two verses of the Quran that I've recited from chapter 6, I translate as follows. Those who repel the meeting with Allah become bankrupt or powerless, so that when the last minute occurs abruptly, they lament, "Oh, our regret for what we have disregarded about it." Then they carry their responsibilities on their rear end. Alas, what they are responsible for is despicable. What is a life of inferiority without greed and craving? But the dwelling beyond is better for those who manage challenges. Don't you use your reason? Islam is not a religion that is given to a certain group of people. Islam is a way of life that has been given to all human beings by our Creator Allah. Just as He created the world and everything in it, providing for the physical and material welfare of human beings, He has also created a system by means of which human beings can develop themselves. It is therefore unfortunate that throughout ages, those who received the messages of Islam changed it to form different faith systems or different religions. And so we have had Hinduism, Buddhism, Christianity, Judaism, and even Islam. So much so that Muslims think that the revelation of the Quran and the gifts, the knowledge that was given to the Prophet Muhammad are given specially for Muslims to the exclusion of others. So they have divided the world into Muslims and non-Muslims. That seems to be incompatible with the teaching of the Quran that says, don't say you're believers, but say you're Muslims because faith has not entered into your heart. So it's quite possible for Muslims to not have faith in their heart if you want to take that interpretation of the Quran. And therefore to think that belonging to Islam makes you somebody or something special to the exclusion of others is not a teaching of the Quran. What is also unique is the way in which the Quran provides its messages, especially information about the Prophet Muhammad and indeed other prophets of Allah. Now, Muhammad is not like any other historically presented personality or prophet. When we look at other faith systems, we will see that they give a historical account of the various founders of the religions: Ram or Krishna, Abraham, Jesus Christ, David, Solomon. And you read so much about history in history that records primarily the outer acts and the behavior of these persons. And similarly, in the case of the Prophet Muhammad, we have Sirat or biography and we have Hadith, but these indicate only the outer acts and the outer behavior of the Prophet Muhammad. But when we look at how the Quran presents these personalities, we will observe and we will see that the Quran gives us the inner feeling and the thoughts of Muhammad and even other prophets of God and other persons, whether they are opponents of Islam like Pharaoh or the son of Noah and other personalities, the father of Abraham. The Quran expresses what are in their minds and their thoughts, not merely their behavior and their action. So we find in the Quran, the Prophet Muhammad is pointed out to us as one who suffers grief because people are not accepting his message. Here is an individual who lived his life isolated from the malpractices and the evil ways of his people for his entire childhood and teenage life. Then he got married. Then he isolated himself further into the cave of Hira, wondering how he can bring change to his people. And then he was called to the task. All that he did was merely to make people better human beings. He was not setting up a dynasty. He was not trying to build a palace. He was not searching for political power or economic power or whatever, military power. This was not his mission. He was actually searching for ways and means to empower people to change their habits and to turn away from evil ways into making the society a good society and the nation and the world a good world. But the Quran does not only tell us about the Prophet Muhammad and his internal feelings. It speaks about Abraham and his thoughts about idol worshipping. He looked at the sun and looked at the moon. He said, "This cannot be my God. This can't be God," because it rose and it set. And so it tells us how Abraham thought, how he argued with the king about life and death. We find the Quran speaks about Joseph, the Prophet Joseph, and his struggle against adultery and unfaithfulness. And so with every prophet of God, you will find the thoughts of these prophets are expressed in the Quran. And you would not find that in other scriptures or other historical events. This leads us to appreciate and to understand that the purpose of Islam, and the Quran has completed this, it has perfected this. The purpose of Islam, and Islam, remember, is not a religion that was given to the Prophet Muhammad, it was given from even Adam, from the time immemorial. And so, when Islam was given from time immemorial up to the time of the Prophet Muhammad, and this is his object right now, even today, is that the object of Islam and the purpose of Islam is to indicate to us that the object of human creation is to attain nearness to Allah. To attain nearness to Allah. And this begins through faith. In one verse of the Quran, it says every human being, everyone without exception, has been inspired from birth with the knowledge of its creator. Am I not your Lord, says the Quran in chapter 7. Am I not your Lord? You can testify that yes, there is a creator. So the first stage for human in developing nearness to Allah is to have faith in God, to believe in Allah. The second stage is hearing the revealed word and acting upon the messages of Allah and the guidance that is here. So having faith in God is one thing, but being able to reach Him, you need to have a goal. We may know, I want to go in a particular direction. I want to go to London, I want to go to Port of Spain, I want to go to San Fernando, I want to go to America, any part of the world. You believe that there is a place that you can go to, but how do you go there? Can you go by car? Can you go by ship? Can you go by airplane? You have to look at what is available and act upon those guidelines that are given for you to reach those particular localities. And so the last stage in this three-stage journey towards Allah is called Liqa Allah. And Liqa Allah means to meet and see Allah face to face. The Quran itself tells us, work hard towards your Lord, your nurturer, facing all challenges until you meet Him. Until you meet Him. So that rejecting belief in Allah is one thing, and there are many people who don't believe in God. They reject the faith in God. But rejecting meeting with Him is even worse. Because it is by meeting with Allah that we are connected with Him, and it is that connection with Allah that gives us the power and the strength to help us to grow. Most of us are well aware of the fact, nowadays in this modern world, that in the creation of the human physical self, right from birth and even before birth, there is what is known as stem cells. And stem cells are basically cells in the human body that can be modified, whether by hormones, whether by chemicals, whether by natural progression, whether by circumstance and situation, by nutrients. But these stem cells grow into other functional cells and other functional organs. So the stem cells can turn into cells that give us muscle and strength. Stem cells can turn into cells of the blood. And so with other organs and other parts of the body, the skin, and all of these things. But the stem cells are therefore the raw natural cells that can, by influence, grow and form and turn into other cells that are necessary for physical survival. What the Quran teaches us is there's a spiritual stem cell, and that is called the nafs, which is pure. And that nafs or personality or character can turn into anything. Just as stem cells can turn into cells that are good, they can also turn into cells that are bad. They can be cancerous, they can turn into tumors and other things that can growth that can affect your health and your movement. Similarly, in the spiritual plane, our nafs is a spiritual stem cell that can grow into good or bad depending upon what it is fed with. And so spiritual stem cells need to grow or they need to be developed into what we call a functional personality. A personality that can function at the workplace, in the home, as a parent, as a teacher, as a professional, as a member of a community, as a sports individual, or any aspect of life that is essential and necessary. So just as we see that the physical self needs physical food, the spiritual self needs, for its growth and development, spiritual food, and those foods are what we call the qualities of Allah. the attributes of Allah. And so the Quran tells us in the verse that I've translated that those who repel the meeting of Allah become bankrupt. If you don't have a connection with Allah, where can you get these necessary food, spiritual food for your personality to grow and develop? They come only from Allah. Truth does not come from anything else except from God. Love does not come except from Allah. Forgiveness, patience, charity, and a host of other qualities that are necessary for character and personality development comes from Allah. They don't come from the material things. We use the material things and one another in order to enhance these. So the Quran says that if you reject and if you repel the meeting with Allah, if you refuse to meet with God, if you don't believe it, you don't accept it, and you don't work towards it, you become bankrupt. You have no value. That's why we are seeing people today in different parts of the world who are in fact committing so many crimes and terror acts of terrorism, regardless of religion, regardless of their status, not only in the poorer countries in the world, in the larger countries of the world, we see bad behavior in so many ways, as has been in the current news nowadays. So the Quran says, but as people do that, as they go on misbehaving and refusing to adopt attributes of patience and tolerance and respect, then a time comes, the last minute, it comes suddenly. And we see some people have been arrested and face jail time, or they have lost their jobs because they cannot go to work, they are now in jail. They cannot look after their families because they are now in prison. So the Quran is indicating to us that a time will come, if you don't pay attention to the development of your soul, when that time comes, it will be just at the last minute you begin to realize. And what do you realize? You begin to lament and say, oh, our regret for what we disregarded about those guidelines that were given to us. We were given the messages, but we disregarded them. And then we will find our responsibility. We are responsible. The responsibility is in our own shoulders, as the Quran says. And what we are responsible for is despicable. It is only when we adopt the attributes of Allah that we can be proud of ourselves. And so the Quran points out to us, compare a world without Allah. It's called a hayatud dunya, the life of inferiority. And what do we find in a life of inferiority? What is a life of inferiority? The hayatud dunya, without greed and craving. What is necessary for that life is greed and craving, not charity, not respect, not control, self-control, but greed and craving is the way of the world. People who reject the attributes of Allah. And so the Quran says, but the dwelling beyond is better for those who manage challenges. We face so many challenges in life, health challenges, financial challenges, family and community challenges that are there. And it is only with the strength that we get from Allah, the attributes that we get from Him, the qualities that we get from Him, that we can face and manage those challenges. So the Quran says, "Afala ta'qilun." Can't you use your reason? Don't you see? And there's some people who think, well, we grew up in Islam, and that's all we know. Whatever tradition, if I'm a Sunni, a Shia, Ahmadi, whatever, that's all I know. I don't know anything else about my religion. But isn't Islam a religion that began with saying, "Ikra bismi rabbika allazi khalaq, khalaqal insana min alaq, ikra wa rabbukal akram, allama bil kalam, allama al insana ma lam ya'lam." It is a religion that encourages us to really increase in knowledge. The Prophet Muhammad himself says, seek knowledge from the cradle to the grave. And if you have to travel even to China, but seek knowledge. Islam came to remove ignorance. And you will find lack of knowledge is what makes people ignorant. Because they don't know. Or they have fake knowledge, fake news. We have seen that advertised recently when said people misbehave and committed acts of terrorism because of fake information, false information. So the Quran points out to us that you cannot manage challenges using physical means alone. You cannot manage challenges using physical means alone. Inner strength is also required. And inner strength is also required. I mean, we have seen that in so many cases. Sometimes you see a person extremely ill, and the doctors are doing their best. And then they will tell you, well, you know, that individual is fighting. But they are sometimes in a case of semi-coma or a coma, or even put in a medical coma. But they are fighting because there's an inner spirit in them that is, in fact, striving to react to the medications and the treatment that is given there. So this inner strength can be induced by others praying for you, for example. Just as you will see a patient, a doctor will inject you with medicine, and that will function and make you better once again, whether it's a vaccine, whether it is a tablet, whatever it may be, whether it's a medical procedure. So people from outside can help you in your yourself inside by means of the physical means that are available. Similarly, in the case of spiritual enhancement and empowerment, we find that we can pray for others, or we can give them comfort, or we can give them kind words. Just as a doctor could inject you with medicine, we can inject people with spiritual qualities through our relationship with them. So we can develop our own inner strength and inner spirit, inner power, but we can also get it from others. And that's why we have, for example, the Prophet Muhammad. In that, as we know his life, and even the other prophets of God as outlined to us in the Quran, this gives us strength. We see personalities outside of us. Chapter 21 of the Quran tells us of the various prophets and the challenges they faced and how they reacted to it, how they depended upon Allah, and how they were successful. And we can do just as well by depending upon Allah and praying for it to Him and communicating with Him and function in our community and society by developing these attributes and these qualities of Allah, so that we can enhance and make ourselves of great value and not bankrupt. So the Quran concludes in this these two verses by saying, crave for a life beyond the physical needs. Don't crave for the things of this world alone. They are there. They are available and they are necessary. But crave also for a life which is beyond the Darul Akhirah. Pursue the Darul Akhirah, the environment that is beyond the material world. And then you can enjoy both worlds. You can enjoy a material world with all the material things, but you'll also be able to enjoy the spiritual world, the world in which we have love and patience and tolerance and peace and understanding and cooperation and respect, and we can go on and on and on. What a wonderful society we will have if people only understand the message and the teachings of the Quran. Barakallahu lana wa lakum fil Quran al-Azim wa nafa'ana wa iyyakum bil ayati wa zikr al-hakim innahu ta'ala jawadun kareem malikun barrur raufur rahim. Alhamdulillah, nahmaduhu wa nasta'inuhu wa nastaghfiruhu wa nu'minu bihi wa natawakkalu alayhi wa na'udzu billahi min shururi anfusina wa min sayyiati a'malina. May yahdihillahu fala mudilla lahu wa may yudlil fala hadiya lahu. Wa nashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lahu wa nashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluhu. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ala ali Muhammad kama sallaita ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim innaka Hamidum Majid. Allahumma बारिक अला मुहम्मद व अला आलि मुहम्मद कमा बारकत अला इब्राहीम व अला आलि इब्राहीम इन्नका हमीदुम मजीद। अल्लाहुम्मा अंसुर मन नसर दीन मुहम्मदिन सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम वजअलना मिन्हुम। अल्लाहुम्मा अख्ज़ुल मन खज़ल दीन मुहम्मदिन सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम वला तजअलना मिन्हुम। इन्नल्लाह यामुरु बिल अदलि वल इहसानि व इताइ ज़िल क़ुर्बा व यन्हा अनिल फ़हशाइ वल मुनकरि वल बग़य यइज़कुम लअल्लकुम तज़क्करून। उज़्कुरुल्लाह यज़कुरकुम वदऊहु यस्तजिब लकुम व लज़िक्रुल्लाहि अला अकबर।